Good day, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. In this presentation, we will briefly outline the history of compiling, updating, and disseminating the taxonomic backbone of South African plants. We will look at current data management processes and very briefly touch on challenges faced in updating the backbone. But first, a bit of background to set the scene. The flora of Southern Africa, or FSA region, shown here in the map, is a hotspot of botanical diversity. It harbors the richest temperate flora in the world and is home to about 6% of the world's plant diversity, including an entire floristic region. 50% of the vascular flora of Africa, as well as 50% of continental endemics, occur in Southern Africa, which is less than 10% of the total land area of the continent. 50% of known succulent plants of the world occur in Southern Africa, and within this diverse region, South Africa is considered to be a megadiverse country, harboring 381 families, over 2,600 genera, and over 21,000 species, of which around 20,000 are indigenous, with a species-level endemism of 60%. Although Southern African plants appeared sporadically in herbals and catalogues from as early as 1605, one of the first catalogues to include a large number of Southern African plants was that by Burman. But probably the first publication to focus entirely on South Africa was the first Flora Capensis by Linnaeus, on the 502 species of plants that early collectors had sent to him from the Cape of Good Hope. Later, Karel Thunberg, a student of Linnaeus, visited the Cape and described the plants he had collected, of which over 1,000 were new to science. Several taxonomic treatments followed, including the well-known Flora Capensis of Harvey and Sonder, and several volumes from the Flora of Southern Africa series, to name but a few. Computerization of information from these and numerous other publications started when the Précy database was developed in the 1970s. The next few slides will illustrate how outputs of the backbone developed over the years. The first output contained a simple list of accepted names of Southern African plants. The second edition also included synonyms and references to recent literature, and updates to the backbone was regularly published in the journal Bothalia. Several updated, annotated versions of the checklist was published, and eventually these included regional distribution, life cycle, life form, plant height, and altitude. The annotated Southern African backbone was made available online in 2006. And two website upgrades saw the additions of plant images, distribution maps, and text from the Flora of Southern Africa volumes. And updates were regularly made up to February 2013. During this time, data from Précy was migrated to a Brahms platform, and the plant database was renamed as the Botanical Database of Southern Africa, or BODATSA for short. Following migration, the PAWSA website was also redeveloped and relaunched in 2016. For the first time, it included specimen-level information, thus aligning with global efforts to mobilize plant biodiversity data. And updates are posted at the beginning of each quarter. Also available on PAWSA is an official yearly release of the South Africa National Plant Checklist. This is also disseminated on SANBI's institutional repository, together with documents like the checklist policy, the classification system followed, and annual reports on changes and additions made to the backbone. The South African taxonomic backbone and the closely associated eFlora of South Africa projects also feed into global initiatives like the African Plants Database that produced the first ever taxon backbone for Africa. as well as the World Flora Online project. Now remember that Southern Africa harbors 6% of the world's flora, of which over 60% are endemic to the region. So we provide an important proportion of unique data towards this global initiative. The taxon backbone covers indigenous and naturalized plants occurring in South Africa, and groups that are currently covered are the mosses, liverworts and hornworts, the lycophytes and ferns, the gymnosperms, and the angiosperms, and we are in the process of also adding the marine macroalgae. Maintenance of indigenous taxa was always prioritized in the taxonomic backbone, but recently the scope was extended to also focus more on our naturalized flora. Thus far, this dataset has been managed differently, and this will likely need to continue going forward, with an emphasis on presence or absence and confirmation of naturalized or invasive status. A single standard family level classification is followed for each group in the backbone. For the mosses, hornworts and liverworts, the following publications and updated websites are used. For the ferns, lycophytes and the gymnosperms, these are the publications that are followed. Now the family level classification that is followed for the angiosperms is a bit more complex. The classification followed is based on APG2, with the bracketed families recognized at family level. Now, bracketed families were tentatively included in other families, but you had the option to still recognize them in APG2, which we have done. However, in APG 3 and 4, most of these bracketed families were synonymized, but we prefer to still recognize them. New families that were described after APG2 are included, as well as any additional families that were recognized in APG 3 and 4. However, where families that was recognized in APG 2 were synonymized, we continue to recognize them at family level. This decision was widely discussed and concurred among South African botanists. And from a Southern African perspective, it makes more sense to treat smaller families rather than the large families of APG 3 and 4. Many of the contentious bracketed families of APG 2 and later lumpings have their centers of diversity in Southern Africa, and the classification followed in the South African taxon backbone is better suited to our flora. We, for instance, prefer to treat a narrowly defined Asparagaceae, Riscaceae and Hyacinthaceae at family level, rather than the single, large and heterogeneous Asparagaceae of APG 3 and 4. This deviation from APG 4 is well documented, and it is easy to amend our outputs to follow APG 4 families where needed. There is a clear policy and strategy that guides how updates are done and which groups should be prioritized. 2 staff members with a sound knowledge and understanding of plant nomenclature and literature take full responsibility for maintaining the backbone. Only published changes are incorporated, and the latest published evidence-based treatment for a taxon is followed. Where competing classifications exist, these are referred to the South African Plant Checklist Committee for consideration. And this committee is comprised of qualified taxonomists from various South African institutions. Now, maintaining the taxon backbone of a megadiverse country comes with certain challenges. One of these is finding the required literature. But with numerous sources providing access to literature online, this is becoming less problematic. However, several old South African publications and numerous obscure journals are not yet available online. It seems to be difficult to reach all your end users. Even though up-to-date information is available online and widely publicized, some people still use old and outdated sources. And keeping up with all the published changes and new taxa with only 2 people doing updates is likely our biggest challenge. So we are looking at options to streamline our processes even more. Thank you very much for listening.